Yes guys, welcome back to another Fantasy Football Fix YouTube video. My name is FPL Nacho and today's video we are going to be looking at those best value midfielders in the game. In particular, those that are 6.5 million and cheaper, because I really think there are some incredible options available to our team. So as always, if you're new around here, please do consider smashing that subscribe button. And of course, if you're looking forward to today's video, please make sure you do drop a like. So enough further ado, let's get into today's video. So before we deep dive into the specific players that we're looking at in today's video, this is going to be the first section. I do want to state that there are quite a few managers that are going for the 4.5 million midfielders, the likes of Harry Winks or Nottingham Forest's Sangara, and that definitely is a strategy that you can go for. Maybe use the additional savings to invest in defenders, for example. But I do think right now, looking at the players in the game, the best 0.5 million that you can spend is upgrading a 4.5 million option, hence the players that I mentioned, to some of these options that you can see on your screens. I really do think when I look at the players available, that is the best use of your money you can make in the game. Because when we compare someone like Harry Winks to a Rodgers or an Ahmad or even an Oscar Bob, who we will touch on in this video, that is a huge improvement in your team for only 0.5 million. So please do consider that. But again, I appreciate different managers have different strategies. So the first three players on this list is going to be Hudson-Odoi at 5.5, Rodgers at 5, and Ahmad at 5. I think all of these offer brilliant value in those opening game weeks. Going to touch on Rodgers and Ahmad first and foremost at the same price point. Rodgers at Aston Villa. Obviously, in terms of him last season, a bit of a breakout season. And when we look at the numbers here, it has to be said, these are limited minutes, but Ahmad's minutes are even less. So we are looking at small sample size for these players. But I would say Rodgers did establish himself as a regular starter in this Aston Villa team. And of the two, long term, I think there is an expectation that Rodgers is probably the better pick for minutes over a 10-game week period, as opposed to Ahmad, who has strong competition from the likes of Garnacho, Anthony, Kirksey, all these sorts of players who can steal minutes away from him. So looking at Rodgers first and foremost, you can see he leads the way for goals per 90 and for XG per 90. But there is quite a big discrepancy between the goal output and his underlying numbers. So while we were seeing him be a goal-scoring midfielder last season, I think that trend will continue this year for Aston Villa. But will we see the output as consistent over the course of a whole season? I'm going to say no. So while he looks fantastic, and I do think he is a great option, don't be expecting 0.42 goals per 90. I expect that to come down to the numbers that we saw in terms of his underlying numbers. And also it's worth noting a little bit of creativity in that Aston Villa team as well. When we compare that to Ahmad's, his numbers are basically half that of Rodgers. But again, we are looking at a very, very small sample size, but very much a chance creator in this Man United team. And you can see that is held in for good stead with his FPL points per 90 being 5.34. When we take a look at the fixtures for the two in the opening weeks, Man United at home against Fulham is a decent opening fixture, but then Brighton away, Liverpool at home, followed by Southampton away. A real mixed bag of fixtures for Man United. In terms of Aston Villa, West Ham away, followed by Arsenal at home, Leicester away, Everton at home. I'd probably say Aston Villa slightly have the better fixtures, but I would say there's not much between it. In terms of the fives, if I was looking to invest one long term, it would be Rodgers. I think we can lean more on his minutes guaranteed, even though it will be Champions League around game week 4, game week 5. Ahmad, I think, is a brilliant 1 to 3 game week punt, but I do expect minutes to be rotated as we progress throughout the season. But he has been one of the best performers in pre-season. Now, I want to quickly note before we come on to Hudson-Odoi that Oscar Bob is another player that has stood out in pre-season. His minutes have been limited to say the least last year. In about 300 minutes, he managed to rack up a goal and 2 assists, which is great. And this preseason, he's carried on that trend with a couple of goals. With the likes of Bernardo Silva, Grealish, Foden, De Bruyne, all being a little bit unsure about their game time in game week 1, I think there is a real opportunity for Oscar Bob to be the starter for Man City in the opening game weeks. And if we do see Oscar Bob play in the Community Shield this weekend, I'm going to go as far as saying that at 5 million, he would be my number one pick for the first 4 game weeks. Beyond that, I think Rodgers is rightly so the long-term pick. So just to conclude the 5 millions, I would rank them as a mad third, Rodgers second, Oscar Bob first. However, if we see Oscar Bob bench in the Community Shield, then that just makes Rodgers clearly the best 5 million. Now, the big question we need to ask ourselves is, at 5 million, do we try and find 0.5 million and upgrade our teams to Hudson-Odoi, who has been very popular in a lot of people's teams? When we look at his underlying numbers, his goal output per 90 was very good at 0.39. A lot of those coming in the second half of the season for Hudson-Odoi. However, my main concern about Hudson-Odoi and why I am debating him in my team is the underlying numbers suggest that he really did overperform. 0.14 XG per 90. While that is it's okay, nothing really to scream home about. And when we see him play, obviously scoring with that cut in, finish in the bottom corner, it is a very low XG chance. And while he has almost mastered the finishing, I don't think it is an action that he's going to repeat week in, week out for Nottingham Forest. And that is my major concern about Hudson-Odoi. I think he's good, and when we look at the fixtures for the opening three, they are fantastic against Bournemouth, Southampton and Wolves. I'm a little bit concerned whether he can actually replicate the goal scoring output that what we saw last season. So I probably would say Hudson-Odoi ticks all the boxes in terms of goal threat, guaranteed minutes, great fixtures for the opening three. But I would actually go as far as saying that I might prefer Oscar Bob in a 3-game week punt if we get confirmation that he is going to be available for the Community Shield, which enhances his chances of playing in game week 1. But let me know your thoughts in the comments on this options, guys. Next up, we're going to move into 6.5 million options where there are some great picks available to us. So taking a look at the 6.5s, and it's worth noting there are plenty of others that haven't been included in this list. So once I conclude this section, if there are others that you think need to be in the discussion, put them in the comment section. I'll be sure to respond and give my thoughts on that particular player. But the 4 that we're looking at right now is going to be Chelsea's Nkunku, Nottingham Forest's Gibbs White, Kulusevski of Spurs, and Szoboszlai at Liverpool. So first up, Nkunku. We have to note that he has played the least minutes of these 4 options. So while the numbers look good, it is a small sample size. Compare that to the likes of Gibbs White, who played the full season, Kulusevski, Szoboszlai. So Nkunku needs to be remembered with that. 0.62 goals per 90 is fantastic, and even his XG per 90 at 0.52 was really, really solid. So I look at those numbers and I think to myself, even though the goal output looks a little bit unsustainable, even if it comes back to the mean, which is 0.5 per 90, that is unbelievable value for a 6.5 million midfielder. And when we compare that to the other options, nobody is anywhere near him in terms of that goal scoring threat. Obviously, the assists per 90 don't exist. However, what we've seen in pre-season is actually Maresca playing him as more of an 8 in this midfield, sometimes playing up front and even off the left. I think that's going to enhance him as not only a goal scoring threat, but also a chance creator in this Chelsea team. Because after watching him in his days before Chelsea, this guy is also an elite creator for their respective teams. So I think Nkunku is going to offer a bit of both this season, and while his goal output may slightly come down, I would expect his creativity to improve in this Chelsea team under Maresca. And obviously with the opening fixtures, Man City, Wolves, Palace, Bournemouth, I think they're really good. And we have no certainty right now whether Cole Palmer is going to be fully fit and available for game week 1. Paying 10.5 million for Palmer feels quite a stretch. So I think maybe going for Nkunku in the opening game weeks, knowing that if he does well, that price is going to skyrocket in the opening game weeks, and you've already got a piece of that Nkunku pie. So Gibbs White obviously is on the screens here, and he is the alternative to Hudson-Odoi. And I think we probably all agree, if we were having Gibbs White and Hudson-Odoi at the same price, we probably all would buy Gibbs White. I think his minutes are guaranteed. His goal threat in terms of XG per 90 is pretty much similar to that of Hudson-Odoi. His creativity is better than Hudson-Odoi's. And as I said, I just feel a bit more comfortable having Gibbs White in the team. But when we compare Gibbs White to someone like a Christopher Nkunku and the possibility that he possesses, I just feel like Gibbs White doesn't really justify the 6.5 million price bracket when we can get Hudson-Odoi at 5.5. So for me, Gibbs White is great, but I wouldn't put him ahead of Nkunku. And if you are going to go for Nkunku, you might as well pay $1 million less and just get Hudson-Odoi in your teams. In terms of Kulusevski, this is a really, really interesting one, because while last season his numbers were a little bit inconsistent, XG per 90 at 0.16 wasn't really anything to scream home about, and even his assists per 90 were poor at 0.1. I do think right now we are seeing him being played as a number 9 in pre-season. Now, we need to caveat that by saying Dominic Solanke looks like he is coming to Spurs. And if he is going to be available for game week 1, I think Kulusevski, the uncertainty about where he plays in this Spurs team probably means he isn't an option in our teams. But if we were to see a situation where maybe Solanke gets signed but no confirmation that he's going to be available for the opening game weeks, Leicester away and Everton at home in the opening game weeks, I think is actually brilliant to have a piece of that Spurs attack. And Kulusevski could be the way into that. But as I said, this is really dependent on the signing of Solanke, because if he gets signed and he starts down the middle in game week 1, Kulusevski might go out to the right, which will have a negative impact on the other 6.5 million in Brennan Johnson. So I think automatically that makes neither of these an option for our teams. Finally, Szoboszlai. Now, we need to remember that Jurgen Klopp played Szoboszlai basically as Jordan Henderson last year, as a box-to-box runner, not really contributing in the final third to the extent that he can do so. So while we're looking at the numbers, I almost want to disregard the numbers. And the reason being is we've got a completely new manager under Arne Slot who looks like he could play Szoboszlai anywhere. Now, I don't expect him to play in the double pivot throughout the season. I expect him to be in the number 10 or maybe even as a false 9. And if that was to happen, I think these numbers are going to skyrocket in the opening game weeks. When we look at the fixtures, Ipswich away, Brentford at home, Man United away, Nottingham Forest at home, they are fantastic fixtures to target offensively. Now, of course, can Szoboszlai cover Mo Salah? Absolutely not. But if you're in a position right now where you can't afford the Egyptian king and you're a little bit worried about Diogo Jota's minutes, I think at 6.5 million, this is the route that you go into this Liverpool midfield. So to conclude on the 6.5s, personally, I feel like Nkunku is the best 6.5 because of the multiple positions he could play and the chance that he might play as a forward in this Chelsea team. I think next up, I think Szoboszlai is my next favourite at 6.5, followed by Gibbs White and then Kulusevski. I was really hot on Kulusevski. With the Solanke news, it has slightly diminished. So that is going to be a wrap up on the 6.5 millions. As I said, Nkunku for me is a standout, but keep an eye on Szoboszlai. I think that one is a sleeping giant. And that's going to conclude the best value midfielders ahead of game week 1. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If I've missed any, please do let me know. I really think Oscar Bob is one to watch as well after the Community Shield. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please do drop a like and smash that subscribe button. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.